Perfect. All right. uh, Good afternoon. I'm Bear Wilson with the Houston Fire Department. I am assigned to our hazardous materials response team. And my prior life over here at the hazmat team, I was actually assigned to our training academy and tasked with training all 4,000 members of the Houston Fire Department in the traffic incident management program. So a little bit about me. I am a captain on the hazardous materials team. As you can see on the right, it's a picture of my here at the fire department and my family. On the left, also, I wear a different uniform on my days off. I work for the Harris County Sheriff's Department as well. So I play good cop, bad fireman, or is it good fireman, bad cop? That's supposed to be a joke. So anyway, I have a little bit of knowledge on both sides of the field here. The fire service, I've been working in that for about 28, almost 29 years. Law enforcement, about 9 years. So we have a huge problem here in the Houston area. The county that Houston lives in is Harris County. It's 1,200 square miles. The city occupies about 670 square miles of that 1,200 square miles. We have 4,000 firefighters, over 95 fire stations, 95 engine companies, 40 ladder companies, and we actually interact with multiple law enforcement agencies, primarily the Houston Police Department, state police. We have constables' offices here within the area as well. There's 90 law enforcement agencies in this county, 54 fire departments. That includes Houston Fire Department, Houston PD. A lot of jurisdictional lines that cross over each other, so it gets really crazy, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the discussion. So what we were experiencing on the fire side was extremely long on-scene times for minor crashes, even crashes without injuries. And we were trying to solve a problem. We taught everybody traffic incident management on the fire side. We were getting through most of our law enforcement agencies, traffic incident management as well. And we were still experiencing these long on-scene times. So I went to a counterpart at the Houston Police Department and said, we gotta work on this. We gotta figure something out. At the time, he was in school, so he kind of took this on as his project. Most of what you're about to see is a document that he actually pushed through the Houston Police Department. I helped him work on it. It was a collaborative idea, collaborative work together. So what we saw was Houston Police Department crash reports from August 31st of 2017 through August 31st, 2018, one year. HPD had responded to 24,000 crashes on all the major freeways. We didn't include any of the side streets, just the major freeways in that year span. 67,000 crashes per day on our freeways. So 75% of those crashes did not involve major injury by any means. Most of those crashes as well, the vehicles were drivable, or the occupants could remove them from the roadway. So we have some other discrepancies in the data as well. Number does not include crashes that did not result in a crash report. So what does that mean? In the state of Texas, anything that does damage over $1,000 requires a crash report. Anything under $1,000 did not require a crash report, right? So let's just say somebody's driving down the road. There's a tire that's blown apart, and somebody hits that and might have done some damage to their vehicle. That is less than $1,000 worth of damage for the most part, so it doesn't require a crash report. But it may blow a tire out on that vehicle that impacted that tire. So they're disabled in the lanes of travel. So we wanted to remove those. We have a tow and go program that's in place with Texas Department of Transportation, which requires the towers to show up on scene and then to call and provide their information, the vehicle's information that they're out with, to get authorization to remove those vehicles off the roadway. So as we're working on this, we decided what we would try to do is let's place a couple of police officers at our transportation management center that have the capability to talk to the fire trucks on the radios, but also talk to the police officers on their radios. Because here in Texas, There's a little state law that says that anybody that does not have police officer training cannot have the police officer radio channels in their radios. That's not saying scanners or anything like that. It just means that we can't talk back and forth with all law enforcement. Yes. I remember the presidential directive that says we all communicate, but anyhow. So we wanted to stage these police officers at our Transportation Management Center to try to manage this a little bit better. HFDs dispatched on most of these crashes. They reported unknown injuries by bystanders. So basically what that does on the police side of the house is it lowers the priority of the call response. On the fire side of the house, we only have basically 1 or 2 calls that we respond to non-emergency. Most of our calls we respond to lights and sirens. So in the same time period, HFD was dispatched to 25,000 crashes. So we're a little bit off on our crash numbers. And there again, it's because of the way the call was dropped into our CAD system. What does that require? At least 1 engine or 1 ladder. It could require both. Are dispatched with an EMS unit to the crash scene, 6 personnel. There's about 850 personnel on duty every day for the Houston Fire Department. So that's just a little number there in the big scheme of things. The fire truck remains on scene to manage traffic for HPD officers as the blocker. Many of those vehicles involved in the crashes are drivable. Citizens often decline to do so, even if the vehicle can be driven. Houston Fire Department personnel don't have that authority to remove the vehicle. Here's the city ordinance. I'm not going to read through that. That would bore you guys. The slides will be available after the presentation. So 2 vehicle crash. The vehicles are drivable, no injuries. HFD must wait for HPD's arrival to the scene, which can take a significant amount of time. There again, shift change, you got to change 1 police car over to the next officer. Shift briefing as well played a factor in there. Higher priority calls played a factor in this. Matter of fact, just the other day, just last week, I had a fire truck stuck on a freeway for 3 hours waiting on law enforcement to respond. As mentioned prior, a law enforcement officer has to order that move. That's our city ordinance. In most cases, HPD officers' first action upon arrival is to order the vehicles to be towed and moved to the freeway, right? And there's even, let's go take this a step further. There's even a law in our disorderly conduct code, basically state law, that says that if a firefighter, police officer, or another authority having jurisdiction orders the vehicles to be removed, they shall be removed. It's a misdemeanor crime here in Texas. Most of our district attorneys don't know about it, that it's there. But anyway, we do have some measurements in there that are supposed to help us get these vehicles off the roadway. So the issues Hfd burdens bears the burden of the traffic control with no injury and movable crashes. This burden has resulted in at least 1 fire truck struck per month. Okay, so 1 fire truck is struck per month out there controlling traffic. Average cost of damage is about $70,000 to the fire trucks. In addition, we've lost 2 fire trucks, been completely totaled due to either the frame being completely bent or the back part of the fire truck back behind the cab is completely destroyed, which results in a brand new fire truck of $450,000. Holding the scene increases traffic congestion in Houston. Attempting to navigate those Houston freeways, we have three loops around Houston to try to navigate some of this, and just increases that stuff, right? Also increases the secondary crashes as well. And just a little caveat here. Beginning January 1st of 2023, we will actually have a secondary crash data button on our crash reports on the law enforcement side. So we're going to start collecting secondary crash data. Now, that does not prevent somebody from trying to create a new report that doesn't link it to the primary crash as well. Okay, so there's going to be some discrepancy in that data. How would this work? The event unfolds, HFD arrives on scene, no injuries exist. We would contact the HPD unit working overtime at our Transportation Management Center. by phone, and then they would turn the cameras on the crash, and then they would try to initiate a remote crash investigation, which once they initiated the remote crash investigation, then they can tell the occupant of those crash vehicles to remove their vehicle from the roadway, or they could order a wrecker to the scene to hook up to those vehicles and remove them from the roadway. Okay. At the location, the HFD supervisor will notify or will use his city phone to make that contact, but also to take pictures. We advise them to take about 5 to 6 pictures of the crash scene, and then email those to the overtime officers at the Transportation Management Center, so they had some good documentation of the scene. Okay, so there's some issues that popped up in this, right? Some of the occupants didn't want to talk to a police officer remotely. They wanted to talk to them in person. Firefighters were worried about some of the liability issues. We'll talk about those here in a second as well. And so basically, once it's authorized by the remote officers, we'd move them to an alternate location, basically your local stop and rob, your Home Depot, movie theater parking lot, whatever it may be, something from the main lanes of travel to get that traffic back open again. And then those occupants of the crash vehicles would sit there and wait for an officer to respond non-emergency to complete the crash report, or the remote officer could actually conduct that remote investigation and get all the paperwork done remotely, email all the paperwork to the occupants as well. So only time the HB unit would be needed on scene is if there's some additional on-scene action, maybe some additional citations written, maybe somebody has some arrest warrants out there, whatever it may be. I'm sorry, we changed the city ordinance to express this pilot program and allow this to happen, that we could remotely authorize that record driver, and with the HFD supervisor calling the remote officers as well. HFD and HPD proposed a 6-month pilot program. This was actually funded on a grant from our Texas Department of Transportation. It would utilize 2 HPD officers on 2 different shifts. So we looked at 0500 to 1100 in the morning, heaviest day flow times of traffic, and then from about 1500 to 2100 in the afternoon. There again, heaviest traffic periods of the day, Monday through Friday. Each shift would have at least 1 AHF, I'm sorry, that was supposed to be 1 HPD sergeant and 1 HPD officer at that Transportation Management Center. HFD would deploy smartphones in the highest volume crash locations. So basically what we did is we looked at all 95 fire stations, and we took the top engines and the top ladder companies that respond to these type of crashes. It ended up being, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head, 23 different fire stations, and we deployed those phones. We did a little bit of training with each shift and each crew on how to use the phone, what we expected when they showed up on scene, and then said go. So here's a picture of our city. Basically, all the colored in areas is the city of Houston. It's 60 miles east to west and about 70 miles north to south. So huge distances, great distances here. These are the fire stations that were involved, as I have them outlined there. So you can see some of the outlying areas didn't have it. And it was basically the closer to the center of the city, we experienced the highest crash volumes there. What was our purpose of this program? Was to increase the responder safety by reducing on-scene time, improve crash clearance goals, enhance our interagency cooperation and relationships, decrease the response times to those incidents, reduce our incident duration, reduce associated congestion, reduce our cost and risk exposure to the citizens, reduce the risk of secondary crashes, and enhance fire and police response efficiency as well. So when we proposed all of this, that's where our main bullet points there. We ran this program, and we had to stop because of COVID. Then we relaunched the program in September of 2020, and ran it until the end of January 21. And in the first month, we had 75 crashes that qualified our criteria. So I mentioned we have 60 on average 67 crashes per day on our freeways, but only 75 qualified for our program. Two citizens out of that 75 actually complied. Most citizens told our fire supervisors that their insurance company told them not to move the vehicles from the roadway. We also heard our attorneys told us not to move these vehicles from the roadway unless law enforcement was on scene, and they didn't consider a remote investigator as law enforcement on scene. And of course, you know, I told our fire supervisors that were there, I said, don't get any kind of, physical contact or anything like that with these people. We had an issue with our wrecker drivers as well. They didn't listen to the HFD supervisors, obviously, because there was a city ordinance that said that they could only take orders to hook up to these vehicles with law enforcement present. HFD supervisors were worried about the liability. They were worried that, you know, hey, look, you know, what if this person's intoxicated? I tell them to move their vehicle, or if they're intoxicated and a wrecker driver hooks up and then tows them to some other location other than what we've noted, would that come back on me? The HFD supervisors weren't trained in what is appropriate insurance, you know, fake documentation. What if some of these drivers did not have any type of insurance? All that kind of stuff. They were worried about that liability coming back on them. A lot of times what we ran into is citizens didn't provide correct information. They had, fake driver's license or out of country driver's license, didn't have appropriate insurance, stuff like that. So these were a lot of our issues that faced us. Ultimately, the program failed. I'll be honest, it failed. It was a disappointment on I think everybody that was involved, HPD, the Houston Fire Department as well. We really wanted to, it really wanted this to be successful. So it ends up now that we've, as I mentioned, I still have a fire truck that's waiting on scene at times for over 3 hours. And a lot of that has to do with jurisdictional boundaries. You know, the crash happened in the city, but now the crash actually stops in the county jurisdiction, or the crash happened in the county and now they stopped in the city jurisdiction. And who's going to respond to that? And it just keeps going back and forth, makes it an issue. One of the biggest successes we found out of this is we need to staff our transportation management center. It helps with the coordination so much better. Some of the things that plagued us along with this is, Joe Q Citizen was maybe a little bit more forthcoming with the fire department than what they were law enforcement, due to maybe some prior histories with law enforcement. One of the other things that popped up was HPD might have received the call information at one location, but the Houston Fire Department received it at another. As the 911 call taker was taking in the information, it updated the Houston Fire Department call slip or incident number, but they didn't update the Houston Police Department incident. So we felt that we needed to staff the Transportation Management Center together, sitting next to each other and being able to handle those calls. We wanted uniformed personnel at those locations. And, unfortunately, the pilot program failed. And so we weren't able to get that. But we identified these needs here. So anyway, I have a little bit of time for some questions and answers after this. Anybody have any questions for me? I think I see some in the chat here.
Yeah, we have some questions. I know the question. I think people don't understand you're from the fire department, although they should. Does Houston have SSP, safety service patrol units? I know the answer, but Captain, do you?
Yes. So the city of Houston went and they've actually hired civilian personnel as part of our transportation management program to go out and occupy the space of a police officer blocking lanes of traffic. However, those people get called to many different locations every day. I didn't include the street level traffic incidents or the city street traffic incidents on there. And so they're bouncing all around the city. We do have a countywide program that's operated by the county sheriff's department, and they only occupy the freeways from one time to the next. Of course, they're out on disabled vehicles. They're out assisting crashes as well. Maybe somebody who's run out of gas, maybe somebody who has a flat tire. And there's only a certain amount of those people as well that are out there. So yes, we do. It's not as robust as we would like for it to be, but it does help out a little bit.
Yeah, there is one. Yeah, there is. Yeah. Another question, Captain. It does, John McClellan. Does the law mean you can't verbally instruct the driver to remove the vehicle to the shoulder, or is it that you can't order a tow truck for a non-drivable vehicle?
So we have a very unique system here with our towing system. There's over 900 towing license within the city. There's about another 700 towing license in the county. I cannot order a tow truck to move the vehicle over to the shoulder at all. As a firefighter, if I have my firefighter uniform on, it has to be law enforcement personnel. And there's some history with that. Just the Reader's Digest version, best thing I can tell you is that law enforcement takes inventory of the vehicle. They assure the inventory will be there when it gets to the storage yard. If a firefighter did that, he doesn't have that authority to take inventory or even possession of anything within the vehicle. So that's probably the easiest way to explain that.
Okay, thanks. Another one. Were all of your Houston Fire Department struck by incidents into the National Struck By database, which you may not be aware of? Are you aware of that new struck by database that we have?
No, sir, I am not. Now, here's the next big issue. I'm one cog in the wheel, right?
Yeah.
And I don't get notified of all of these incidents. Typically, it's somebody on a fire truck that may notify me, or I read it on the news the next day. We run over 1,000 calls in a 24-hour period, and about 50% of our calls ended up being crashes. That's on city streets and the freeways of both. So it's I'm sorry, not 50%, 28%. I'm sorry, 28% of those. So yeah, I haven't reported those to that particular website, and I don't know if the data would be accurate.
Yeah, so yeah, we're just making people aware that it's just recently stood up in the last 6 or 9 months or something like that. But yeah, if there was any way to get the data struck by date information, we're trying to get, not with fatalities, but we're trying to get injuries, and also vehicles struck would be a pretty good number to have, or information to have on that. And I know you have to get going, but one more. Well, we already answered that one. And then Todd Lace had a couple of questions. What did Todd have asked there? Someone else asked me, Kevin.